Welcome back to another Stand on Guard. There's so much to deal with today. And of course, that was just a little sneak preview of the G7 conference in Kananaskis. That was taken when Sir Keir Starmer was visiting with Mark Carney in Ottawa. But I've got to ask a number of questions about why we're even having a G7 conference right now. But we'll be back in mere moments to discuss that.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Yes, please like the station. And we really appreciate it if you can subscribe, because that's how we get our numbers up ultimately and how the station survives another day. Thank you for your support thus far. Let's hit that 60,000 mark by the end of the month. Onwards and upwards from there to 100,000. Before I get into Kananaskis, before I get into the Middle East, this is really worth mentioning. CTV news story. Wildfires in Saskatchewan, just like they were having. And they're having the same problem in Manitoba. But is it really climate change? Is there any proof that climate change is underlying these wildfires that happen every year? Or are there people out there who are so crazy with their environmental extremism that they are starting the fires just so they can blame climate change? Well, it could be just that. Look at this. Saskatchewan wildfires, the RCMP and state. A Cree Nation man and woman face arson charges. I mean, arson is one of the worst crimes imaginable because it potentially can kill people, wildlife, and it destroys millions of dollars of natural resources, property, trees. It is such a wide-ranging crime. And people who do this don't even think about the fact that they're potentially putting human lives in danger, not just animals and not just wildlife, not just the trees, everything else out there in the forest, but potentially killing people. And so this cannot be ignored. Now, I got some good news for you about Kananaskis. And of course, I've got to ask. We've got a war that continues in Ukraine. We have a war in the Middle East that's escalating by the hour. Literally, every time I go to Google News or I see what's the update, the other side is attacking. I think Israel now is retaliating against Iran, who was retaliating against Israel. I'm not buying into this that Israel can do whatever the hell it likes. I think Benjamin Netanyahu is a madman who is bringing his country to the precipice of disaster. This is bad for Israel because he's turned the whole world against Israel by what has happened in Gaza. And I've got to show you this because this is. I was going to show you a slide. I was going to show you a slide of how many times Netanyahu has already said that Iran is on the verge of producing a nuclear weapon. And he's constantly saying that. I don't think Israel has the right to wage preemptive war against anybody. And this is somebody, like I said, I was my whole life completely supportive of everything Israel did. Everything. Just like I supported every American war, but the U.S. cannot get dragged into this. Here's some good news because Rebel News has fought and successfully won the right to cover Kananaskis.
We are in beautiful Banff, Alberta. Why? Because we're here for the G7 summit. It's held in Kananaskis, actually just up the road to the east, but this is where the media are being corralled. And we are here after a very short legal battle with the Carney government. You can see all of our documents and the lawsuit we filed at letusreport.com. But I'll give you the Coles Notes version. The Carney government was dragging their feet to accredit Rebel News. And so we filed a last-minute lawsuit, thanks to your help at that website, letusreport.com. And the Carney Liberals blinked. Why? Because they didn't want to go to federal court with us, where they would be in front of the same federal court that handed the Liberals 2 defeats when we asked for accreditation in 2019 and 2021 to cover the leaders' debate. So they didn't want that 3rd time's the charm humiliation at the hands of the federal court. So they blinked last minute. And so that's why I am here. And I am here with Angelica Toy, who is also accredited, and Sid Fizzard. Now, they were here on site in Banff before I was, and they were snooping around the media center, where I should note to you, there's a very large presence from state broadcasters. And I don't just mean the CBC, I also mean.
Just want to pause it there. Look at the resources the mainstream media has. There's Global, CTV, CBC. They've got all kinds of room. And you know what the reaction from CBC was when Rebel News was allowed to cover the Quebec language or the French language debate, leaders debate. Absolute contempt. These people aren't real journalists. We're the stars here. Just contemptible behavior. But look at the resources the mainstream media gets, and Rebel's about the only independent station there. I couldn't get accreditation, even if I was able to get the Kananaskis to cover this. I couldn't get accreditation with any of the media organs I work for, or certainly my own independent news source would not be getting accreditation from the Carney government. Little bit more of this.
The Chinese state broadcaster, and of course Al Jazeera, the Qatari state broadcaster. Those dictatorship state broadcasters received accreditation before the Alberta journalists who work for the independent news site Rebel News were accredited. Isn't that something? Now, Sid, I want to ask you what you've seen or noticed here as you were snooping around the media center.
So I did take a little, mosey around the building here, and there's 3 floors. The first 2 floors are open pool areas. So media just come in, they sit down, they set up, do whatever. It's an open space. But then on the 3rd floor, that's where the pooled media access is. Now, these are people that, my assumption here is that the pooled media reference, the word here, is the same pooled media that's going to be taking the buses from Banff to Kananaskis. See, we thought, you get the badge to be a Kananaskis G7 media reporter, you're going to the G7 event. No, we're actually only allowed now at the Banff Media Center. If you want to go to the Kananaskis Summit to report, you need to go to the Prime Minister's office and get their approval in order to attend the actual summit, or to ask questions, I believe, at the press conferences that might be taking place here as well. So I just thought it was very interesting. It was a big win that we got in. Yep. And then what do we find out as soon as we get in? Oh no, you need to have the Prime Minister's approval in order to ask questions. I think it's very disingenuously set up that way.
Yeah, we're still fighting that, and I don't think that's going to stop us from doing journalism here. We're going to show you as much of the G7 as we can, and we're going to do our best to ask some prickly questions. For example, I've got some prickly questions for the South African president. Now, Angelica, you want to do some journalism from in and around the Banff town site. Tell us about that.
Of course, well, we're here to tell the other side of the story. And of course, we're probably going to be some of the only media that are actually here to scrutinize the G7 agendas and then also expose the hypocrisy of the environmentalists.
Now,
and that's not hard to do, the hypocrisy of the environmentalists. So thank God we got somebody on scene there who'll actually go to ask those difficult, probing questions, because you won't get anything from the mainstream media. But my question is, why are we having another globalist convention, this time in Canada's backyard, when we have the world on the brink of potentially a nuclear conflict? And I have to say that carefully, because you're not really allowed to talk about that. And are we looking at a 3rd World War? And if we are, it's going to be a nuclear-powered one. But why aren't we having an international peace conference right now? And I know, you say, what the hell? Peace conference? We are on the brink of nuclear conflict. We haven't been this close since the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962. That's quite a while. That was over 60 years ago. But that's where we are right now. And we need to stop this. And it's just like these people are so deluded They don't get it. They don't really think this is a danger. And let's just keep having our meetings like nothing is any different than it always is. Let me tell you, we are living in a very dangerous world right now. I've never seen it more dangerous in my lifetime. And I'm a military guy. I believe in a strong national defense. I believe we need to defend our country and our freedoms now and then. But I don't want a nuclear war. I've seen the effect that a conventional war has on a population, on a country. When I was over in Bosnia, I saw the effect of that. It's ugly. It's terrible. People suffer. And it's 100,000 times worse than that if it's not a conventional war. Here's Donald Trump arriving in Calgary yesterday. I just love this because he's the center of attention wherever he goes. He's taking his time going down the stairs. Because I think we had a bit of a Biden incident the other day. We don't expect Donald Trump to have Joe Biden. He's taking his time. He's saying, yeah, I'm okay. Now we got the Mounties out in the red shirt, saluting, trying to make it like this is really the old Canada. No, it's not. There, he's approaching the Governor General and her son. That's supposed to be mentioned at every event. So, and there he is. Saying hello to Governor General. Got that. There. And there's folks. And here's Anita and Ann. Yes. Looks very happy to see him. Of course, Dominic LeBlanc, primary trade negotiator, once again, just as happy as a lark to see his old friend Donald Trump. Now you proceed to go down the line here. And that's the U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Extra, who has said that if Canada doesn't get its act together with the F-35, Canada could no longer be a member of NORAD. And there he is with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, who, of course, was a guest on the show last week. We had a great conversation with Danielle. They genuinely seem to like each other. I think she's probably the best card Canada has to play in any card game with Donald Trump. So he's proceeding down the end of the line here. And it's amazing how these liberals, and I'm obviously not including Danielle Smith in that comment, but there's so many liberals in that lineup who aren't even trying to mask their joy at seeing Donald Trump in Canada. It looked genuine from these politicians. So who knows? And he's getting a little lecture here from one of the First Nations people in the traditional garb of the Plains Indians. Or Plains First Nation, is that more politically correct? Yeah. Anyway, so it's quite a moment. But what scares the heck out of me is what Donald Trump said just before he left. And we will get to that. Yeah, so if you're thinking there's no sound here, there is. You have no idea what he's saying. You can't even read Donald Trump's lips. But anyway, there he is, having a great time. Let's have a look at what Trump said. Well, just before he left yesterday. I'm having trouble doing this. I don't know why.
So we're going to Canada. Last night was a tremendous success with a fantastic audience. It was supposed to rain. They gave it a 100% chance of rain, and it didn't rain at all. It was beautiful. And so I asked if they gave it 100% chance, right? 100% it was going to rain like crazy, and it didn't rain at all. How did they predict 100 years out and 50 years out or 200 years out? They didn't do too well, the weather people, last night, but it was beautiful.
President, are you and Prime Minister Netanyahu on the same page concerning how to deal with Iran?
Well, we get along very well, and I will tell you that I think we have great respect for each other.
Can you give us a solution?
Go ahead, what?
Mr. President, can you give us a sense of what de-escalate the situation between Iran and Israel?
Well, I hope there's going to be a deal. I think it's time for a deal, and we'll see what happens. But sometimes they have to fight it out, but we're going to see what happens. I think there's a good chance there'll be a deal.
There's a good chance there'll be a deal. But what if they have to fight it out first? That could escalate very quickly if this gets off the rails. And as I said, Israel has been off the rails for quite a long time now during this whole conflict. And they have engendered nothing but bad, toxic blood in the whole Arab world. And the only countries really standing with Israel anymore are Canada to some degree, but the United States. Will they get suckered into another foreign war over this? And if the United States gets involved, will Russia get involved? Will China get involved? And the whole thing is so frightening. Here, I want to put this guy on from Sky News in Australia. Never watched the guy before, but I think he sums the situation up quite nicely here.
What we are already seeing is a world war, World War III. It's not a war in Ukraine over there, a war with Israel over here, and then, China's threatened war against Taiwan over there, all separate. And that's another reason why Israel's war with Iran is so dangerous. As I've said for a couple of years, there is a new alliance of tyrannies. Russia, China, Iran and North Korea all working together, helping each other out with their wars, sending weapons, diplomatic cover, and with their planned wars too. Iran, for instance, supplies Russia with kamikaze drones for its war in Ukraine. And China and Russia are backing Iran diplomatically. Last week voted against that International Atomic Energy Agency resolution condemning Iran's nuclear.
I don't agree with this guy's analysis that this is all Russia's fault, all China's fault, Iran's fault. But he's right. The situation has escalated to the point where it could go over the edge. And that's what we need to acknowledge. I don't care whose side you're on here. And I agree, Iran should not have a nuclear bomb. But how come Israel has one? Should Israel have a monopoly on nuclear weapons in the Middle East? These are questions that should be asked. However, no matter who you're siding with in this, I think we can all agree that if this is not de-escalated, if we don't turn it back, this could have the potential to lead to global conflict. And that's not good. And we'll just watch a wee bit more of this
weapons program. And right now we are seeing how a war in the Middle East can help China. America has been forced to move the aircraft carrier Nimitz and its supporting warships from the Pacific, where they're patrolling near China. It now seems on its way to the Middle East to support Israel, which would leave China, of course, freer to attack Taiwan. I'm not tipping that yet. It's far too early, I think, for China to do that. But this is how this alliance can work, always stretching the West, which is already desperately undergunned. Its weapon stocks are very low after supplying Ukraine for 3 years. And all those Australian ministers saying, we just need to negotiate.
All right. Yes, we do need to negotiate, and we don't need to start. But that's every mainstream media outlet is in the bag for Israel on this thing, to the point where they just can't see how this could become even more explosive, literally. And so I put that on to show that at least this guy, even though I don't really agree with his analysis, at least he understands how this could quickly escalate into a conflict that we don't want to even think about, but we have to start thinking about that. Why were we so concerned about a nuclear war in the 1950s, the 1960s, the 1980s? Why did we used to go out and protest in the millions? Because it seemed like an important thing to do. It seemed like something worth fighting for, to not have a nuclear war. That seemed like something important. Now it's the left that wants war, that constantly foments Yeah, constantly foments this destructive spirit, this toxic spirit in the world, and wants the United States to push harder and harder. This has been a gold mine for the, I hate to use the word, but the neocons in the States who think America has the right to intervene anywhere and to have 900 bases around the world and to just keep getting involved in foreign wars. They've wanted this for decades. They've wanted to knock Iran off the globe for decades. And this is their golden opportunity for people like Republicans, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, who has been pushing for a he has been pushing for a strike against Iran for a long time, knowing full well that it could get out of control very, very quickly. Now, here's that list. This is how many times Netanyahu's claimed that Iran has a nuclear weapon. Like, it's going to have it tomorrow, next week. And he has constantly issued these statements. So what he's doing now is just no different what he's been doing for a long, long time. Now, I want to show you that who might know if Iran is on the verge of having a nuclear weapon or already has one. Maybe the U.S. Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who, when she was testifying before the Senate, categorically said Iran does not have that capability.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. The IC continues to monitor closely if Tehran decides to reauthorize its nuclear weapons program.
You mentioned the war in Israel.
Now, that's Tulsi's opinion. This is Professor Jeffrey Sachs, who I've been trying to get on the show for quite some time, and I think we'll do that in the near future. This is a common sense guy who understands what the stakes are in this high stakes poker game.
In that, and you are an American Jew, right?
Yes.
So how is it to be so critical against Netanyahu? Don't you get reaction from Israel, from the Jewish community in the U.S.? Because you are very, very critical.
Yeah, look, basically everything I know about Jewish ethics and how I was raised is the opposite of what Netanyahu's doing. So I don't regard what Israel is doing as having anything to do with Judaism. It has to do with extreme nationalism. Zionism is not Judaism. Zionism is a nationalist ideology. And Netanyahu is not just a Zionist. He is a vulgar, violent, extremist nationalist. I know he's coming here for a visit. To my mind, he is a danger for the whole world.
Can't get much clearer than that. Here's Tulsi Gabbard again in a post that she put out by herself. A lot of people said, well, why did she put this out? Well, I think it's quite clear. She's concerned that the potential for nuclear war is getting more real every day, and that something has to be said. You have to acknowledge the elephant in the room. We used to be able to do that. We used to be able to talk about it and say, we don't want a nuclear war because it's going to destroy the planet. It's going to destroy 60, 70% of life on the planet immediately. And the radiation fallout will deal with the rest. Or we'll be living in bunkers or underground for decades. This is the reality of nuclear war. People seem to forget that, though. It's like when it no longer became an interest from the Democratic Party in the U.S. When the Democrats started saying, we want war, it's like people started saying, well, I guess nuclear war is not that bad. I guess it might be thinkable. It might even be winnable. Now, there have been psychopaths throughout the last 80 years since we first detonated a nuclear device over Japan in Hiroshima or Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There have been people ever since that said a nuclear war is winnable, and we have to wage a preemptive strike against our enemies. And of course, yeah, except they'll strike back. Here is Tulsi talking about her recent trip to Hiroshima.
Recently visited Hiroshima in Japan and stood at the epicenter of a city that remains scarred by the unimaginable horror caused by a single nuclear bomb dropped in 1945, 80 years ago. It's hard for me to find the words to express what I saw, the stories that I heard, the haunting sadness that still remains. This is an experience that will stay with me forever. This attack obliterated the city, killed over 300,000 people, many dying instantly while others died from severe.
Well, we had to cut that short because there's some visuals in here that would be not allowed on YouTube. And if you've watched historical documentaries on YouTube lately, it's like anything that suggests violence or mayhem or killing is censored, blocked off. So therefore, if you're doing a documentary on the Holocaust, for instance, all of those pictures that are evidence of the Holocaust are literally blurred out so you can't see anything. Now, how is that going to help truth in history? How is that not aiding and abetting people who deny it? Because, well, the pictures are no longer there. Very, very bad mistake, but that's why we had to cut that off abruptly. I encourage you to go to Tulsi's site and have a look at it. And by the way, before it's too late, I'm sorry I didn't say this. Welcome to everybody on Rumble today. We are broadcasting on Rumble every day, and thank you for the hundreds of people who have joined as supporters. We're over 3,000 on Rumble. That's a big deal because a lot of our Rumble viewers are American. But believe me, it's the future of free speech. I always hear the folks on Redacted, Clayton and Natalie's always saying, we need to get moving on Rumble because things could happen on other platforms. And that's what we're dealing with. We don't know. We don't know what the Mark Carney government is up to. I want to show you this because this is the bizarro news story of the week. And I haven't even talked about it. But they found and arrested the suspect in that Minnesota murder case. The guy is accused of killing a representative from the Minnesota legislature and her husband, both of them dead, and another husband and wife were shot and attacked. They apparently are okay. They're going to get through it. But here's the report here, and I'll make a few comments after.
A 57-year-old Vance Bolter, suspected of assassinating one Minnesota lawmaker and nearly killing another, was found overnight by police. He is said to have willingly turned himself over to officers after being found in a field.
Bolter exploited the trust our uniforms are meant to represent. That betrayal is deeply disturbing to those of us who wear the badge with honor and responsibility.
When this sort of evil is in one of our communities, that law enforcement comes together to put all of their resources together to make sure that that person is taken into custody.
Former federal prosecutor and Holtzman Vogel partner Jonathan Fahey joins me now. Jonathan, your reaction to this suspect's arrest?
Well, it's great news that he was arrested. I just saw it this morning, and it really does show probably strong coordination with both, state, federal, local law enforcement, and they did a great job catching this guy. But I think on that earlier clip you're showing, he really is, when they say the face of evil, there's nothing better to describe what this person did other than just pure evil, to go to someone's home, kill them, just for not that there.
I have to say, qualification here. He's accused of it. It's alleged. Don't try him and find him guilty yet, because there might be more to this news story than we know. So he's accused, and it sounds like you're saying it's a fait accompli.
Would ever be a justification, but to just show up at their door, murder them in cold blood, just truly horrific, not only for them, but the entire community around them. So great news that he was caught. Great work by law enforcement there.
Yeah, and the suspected motive is that he was targeting people who support abortion rights. He does have an online presence, and
now this is where it gets murky, because the representative that was shot and killed was not somebody who was known for her support for abortion, as far as I can tell. She was known as the Democrat who sided with the Republicans to cut off Medicare, free Medicare for illegals. And that's apparently what was behind this. And I'm not sure the abortion issue is not a red herring, but
shows that he was a devout Catholic, a pastor who preached at a church in the Congo. And one of his Facebook posts said he sought out militant Islamists in order to share the gospel and tell them that violence wasn't the answer. You just called him the face of evil. How do you go from devout Catholic to committing these crimes, wearing this mask that we see on our screen, and killing 2 people and attempting to kill 2 others?
All right. No, nobody at Fox has identified what this mask is. And thank God I was watching Benny Johnson's show the other day, and he's a big fan of Breaking Bad. This is a Halloween mask that people, I had no idea. It's the lead character in Breaking Bad. And if you have a closer look at it, it's a bald head with a little goatee on the end. It is a dead likeliness of this lead character in Breaking Bad. I confess I don't watch. I have no comment on whether it's the greatest show that ever aired, that some people believe. I've never watched it. But Benny Johnson did fill folks in on what this mask was. And once again, there's no correlation being made by Fox News about this. Why is he wearing that? What does it mean?
Yeah, it's really kind of scary because it does appear that maybe just something snapped with this guy, because at least if you see that, it doesn't look like this would be the person that would be later killing people or have intent to murder people in his head. But certainly something may have happened that changed this guy, but it is just hard to tell. And maybe they'll find that out as they dig deeper into it, not only social media, but they're going to do extensive interviews with like family, friends, neighbors, other people that know him. So there may get some more insight onto that, but it is very troubling to see that.
My question is this guy some kind of Manchurian candidate? Did he get a signal and just go berserk, if in fact he's found guilty of this? What is going on? Because he was close to the Governor Tim Walz administration in Minnesota. And of course, you remember Tim Walz. He was the guy who spent a lot of his time teaching in communist China and held up Maoist China as a beacon of freedom. And as one of the best examples of a government looking after its citizens. Well, they looked after its citizens. They looked after millions of its citizens, and they wreaked absolute chaos in that country. Mao Zedong was a tyrant, a criminal, one of the worst dictators in history, and Tim Walz used to hold him up to say he was a great man, a great leader. Well, that is an absolute stupid thing to say. He was a madman. He was bloodthirsty, killed tens of millions of Chinese people through famine, through torture, through killing, through programs designed to eliminate all political opposition in the country. So Tim Walz has this history. He was also, of course, Kamala Harris's vice presidential running mate in the election. Now he's back as the governor, lost that election. He's back as the governor of Minnesota. He didn't have to step down. That's one thing about American politics. You can concurrently run for another office and keep the office you're currently in. So if you're the governor of Minnesota, you can be the governor of Minnesota throughout the election if you're running even as president or vice president. And if you lose, well, you just go back to your old address. And that's what happened. But this guy was close to the Tim Walz administration. And if you listen to people talk about what was he doing? Now we learn he was a missionary in Congo, reaching out to militant Muslims. Not only that, he was also involved with the food industry in Minnesota, potentially the food packing industry, where a lot of that goes on. And not only that, he was the manager of 6 mortuaries. None of this adds up. I mean, what was the guy really up to? What was he doing with his life? You can't be a missionary, food packer manager, and mortuary manager at the same time. In fact, it makes me wonder. I won't even get into that. But this is how bizarre this story is, and it just keeps getting more bizarre. Now, I want to end the show today. No, we're going to show you the goods because we've got so much more merchandise that you can buy. We've got some great new stickers. We've got the Alberta Proud t-shirts, the Alberta Proud stickers, the Alberta Proud mug, and I'll show you more of those today, but I just want to remind you.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Yes, please have a look at our store. Now, I want to show you another clip here at the very end. This is a reprise of a statement made and a question made by newly elected Conservative MP Andrew Lawton. Of course, he used to be a journalist before he ran for Parliament. But think about this, folks. Your freedom of speech is in the hands of an environmental extremist named Stephen Guilbeault. He's the Minister of Heritage. He's the one pushing censorship bills. And, they're competing right now. Who's going to be the lucky guy to reintroduce Bill C-63? It'll be called something else. But the one that was called the Online Harms Bill, Online Harms Act. Who do you think is going to be the lucky minister to get that? Will it go to Heritage or will it go to Sean Fraser as the Attorney General? The last time it was introduced, the Attorney General, the Justice Minister, introduced it, and it was part of his billywhack. But I bet you, Guilbeault is probably saying, let me introduce it from Heritage. Let's do it from the Heritage side. But this is worth listening to.
Mr. Speaker, baseless smears like that are why these liberals can't be trusted to regulate speech in this country. For years, this Liberal government has determined to censor what Canadians see and say online. From Bill C-11, which put the Liberals in control of YouTube algorithms, to Bill C-18, which squeezed out small and independent media, and to their thought crime Bill C-63. Now we learn in the National Post that cabinet ministers over there are all clamoring over who gets to be responsible for the latest online censorship law. So will the minister who gets to censor what Canadians say please reveal themselves now?
The Honourable Minister.
Even Google agreed that they should do this. Google will pay $100 million to help Canadian journalism in this country. An international US-based company would agree to do that, but the Conservative Party of Canada would vote against this, would prevent that from happening, would want to prevent our media from getting $100 million so that there's more local content, more journalists hired in our newsroom across the country. It is simply unthinkable. It is immoral, Mr. Speaker.
It's immoral to oppose censorship. That is the foundational argument of the Liberal Party of Canada, of the Mark Carney government, the one he keeps referring to as Canada's new government. That's foundational to this new government. Supporting free speech, opposing censorship is immoral. You heard Stephen Guilbeault say it. He's the guy who's monitoring your free speech right now. And that's who your free speech is in the hands of. And it's absolutely frightening. Hope you enjoyed today's show. Let's keep getting those numbers up. Please keep subscribing. Once again, we had some difficulties the other day. I'll say this again. And Redacted got targeted last week. I got targeted last week. We had a huge communication mix-up on the Thursday broadcast. And believe me, this is beyond my control. And I know what they're up to. I know what this is about. Because, yeah, it does get the viewership a little irate because it looks like this is amateur hour. But I'm not controlling the process. And believe me, even shows with 3 or 4 producers were going through this. I don't have 3 or 4 producers. I can't afford 3 or 4 producers, or else I got to get off the air. But we rolled with the punch, we fought back, and we're going to continue to fight back for free speech. And this show will stay fighting for free speech. Thank you for watching. Yeah, blessings, everybody. Susie writes, blessings, everyone. Keep on the fight. We will continue to fight, Susie. Thank you for that. We'll be back again tomorrow. I've got an interview at 1:30 on Vancouver's CKNW. Might have a chance to cover a little bit of question period later. We'll see. But definitely back tomorrow morning at 10. Thanks for watching. Giving you all the news you need to know. Trying to inform you as best I can. God bless this country and Godspeed to